President, I'm here to talk about gas prices and the economy and the effect of the economy on our future. We need to work hard to be sure that we're producing more American jobs, and frankly, I can't think of a better way to do that than produce more American energy. We use about the same amount of energy in a good economy as we do in a weak economy. It's the place to go where we know the consumers are, whether it's the electric bill or gasoline at the gas pump, and we ought to be doing all we can to produce those jobs. Certainly there are many factors that affect the price of oil, things like the value of the dollar, supply and demand, the global events that affect oil, like the problems right now in Libya and other oil-producing countries, or even the weather. You know, I live in a state that's bounded by the Mississippi River, and the flooding down the Mississippi has had some impact on the north-south movement of refined products in the country, and all those things have impact on gas prices. One thing that'll come up this summer that I've worked hard on and my colleagues have joined me on would be looking at what we can do to be sure that our efforts to have clean air don't needlessly restrict the supply of gasoline. You know, as we get into the summer months, too many cities have their own unique blend of fuel, and that means that we turn the refinery centers, the refineries into profit centers, making these unique blends of fuel instead of places that process oil into gasoline and different blends of gasoline only when necessary, as opposed to whenever someone's convinced a city that that unique blend of fuel is the only one that they could possibly use. In my state, in Missouri, we have one blend of fuel in the summer in St. Louis and another blend of fuel across the state in Kansas City and a third blend of fuel in between, and all those have to be blended separately, trucked separately, sold obviously separately, and the Gas Act, which I hope we can talk about more in the next few weeks, is one of the ways that we can say, let's bring as much common sense into the system as we can. Let's take the supply that we have available and use it in the way that makes the most sense. In fact, right before Katrina in 2009, the president was given new authority in cases of natural disaster to suspend these fuel blends if there was a restriction of supply. And the president did that. I don't think he'd had the authority a month before Katrina hit. The president did that, and in the 6 months that that authority was used, gas prices didn't go up in any significant way at all, as I recall, because for that 6-month period of time, gasoline became a commodity again. And if you could get gasoline, you could sell gasoline. If somebody had gasoline, you could buy gasoline. And it didn't matter whether it was the unique blend that had been, you'd become convinced in your community was the only one that was right for you. And we set some standards on those blends at the time. In the Gas Act that 38 of my colleagues have co-sponsored, we'll set more standards. And so that's one way to try to use the supply that we have in a way that makes the most sense. But another way is clearly to go out and find more. You know, our approach to energy needs to be threefold. It needs to be to use energy more efficiently, to use less, to find more, and to invest in the future, to find out what those things are that we need to be looking at as we transition a system. And I'm not at all of the opinion that we won't have a system of a fleet of cars that is powered in different ways at some date in the foreseeable future, but the foreseeable future would be 25, 30, 40 years. I'm equally convinced that no matter what direction we head in fueling automobiles, that 25 years from now, the majority of cars on the highway are still going to be using gasoline. And so that means let's find more of it here, and that's what the Offshore Producing and Safety Act does, that Senator McConnell introduced. I, along with many of my colleagues, co-sponsored that. This bill really tries to restore our offshore exploration of energy 30% of our energy has come from the Gulf. Our domestic energy supply, rather, has come from the Gulf in recent years, and we want to be sure that that number continues to remain at that level. Since April of 2010, the administration's only approved 53 shallow water and 14 deep water permits. Most of those were underway before the Deepwater Horizon spill a year ago, and in fact, the moratorium has, for all practical purposes, become what some people are describing as a permatorium. We permanently decided we weren't going to look at the Gulf for the kind of oil that it can, should, and needs to produce. In fact, offshore energy production is projected to fall by 210,000 barrels per day this year. 210,000 barrels per day this year. That means in the Gulf, we'd be getting 210,000 fewer barrels of oil every day this year than we got last year. Surely that's no solution, to become more dependent on other countries who are the recipient of the jobs that follow our energy future. And we need those jobs to be here. The estimate is that 190,000 barrels per day would be down in 2012 because we've not been pursuing the drilling practices. It's possible that 2011 could be the first year since 1958 that the federal government won't hold an offshore lease sale. The first time since 1958. Does that mean we're less dependent on oil and gasoline than we were in 1958 or 1959 or 1969 or not? No, it doesn't mean that. We're more dependent, and we need to move forward with looking at the resources we have. Recently, I think recently meaning Saturday, in his Saturday speech, the president appears to have reversed course on this issue and has called for Alaska and Gulf of Mexico leases to be reinstated and for an extension of leases impacted by the moratorium. I think this bill actually helps what the president called for on Saturday. Now, that would be lightning speed for the Senate to pass a bill on Wednesday or Thursday that the president asked for on Saturday, but I think this is very much in line with what I would admit is a new position for the president to take, but it's one that he seemed to take firmly on Saturday, and this legislation would help him out. The number of lease sales is undetermined by the president's address, but we could help by pursuing leasing and permitting with this act. This act directs the Interior Department to conduct the offshore lease sales that the administration challenged, or canceled rather, in December of 2010. These were lease sales that were underway. The process was well along, and the administration canceled those lease sales in December of last year. These were lease sales in the Western and Central Gulf and on the Virginia Outer Continental Shelf and the Alaska Outer Continental Shelf. Let's go back to that point. Let those lease sales move forward as they were doing before they were canceled. The president just said Saturday, let's do this. Well, let's do it, and let's give him the tools and encouragement he needs to do it right now. This would end the permanent moratorium that occurred last year in the Gulf. It puts a 30-day time limit for the Interior Department to review and decide on drilling permits. If rejected, the Interior Department has to disclose why it rejected the permits. Shouldn't be anything wrong with that. If a permit should be rejected, everybody ought to be told. It ought to be part of the record. It also provides for default approval if the Interior Department doesn't make a decision within 60 days. And finally, it improves the safety procedures by adding additional requirements for a spill response plan, a containment response plan, to see that that was done. This would mean that we'd have more American energy has two impacts. One, it would inject more supply into the marketplace putting pressure on the worldwide marketplace. It's putting price pressure. And if we